Welcome to the Free and Redeemed podcast. I am your host, Simon Andrade, and here on this specific show, we tackle over key topics that every single Christian struggles with. We bring in guests, we bring in godly wisdom, and more importantly, we bring in scriptures in the Bible to help you enhance your walk with God, bring in confidence, and put you into the direction of freedom and grace by the power of the Holy Spirit. If you're new to this platform, I encourage you to subscribe. With all that being said, guys, let's get started with today's episode. What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Free and Redeemed podcast. I am so glad that you guys were able to tune in. If you're new to this channel, welcome. Don't forget to subscribe, like this content. I hope everyone had a wonderful Easter weekend. At the time of recording this, of course, Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday, and Good Friday has already passed. I was going to record another Good Friday episode, or repost that episode that I recorded a year ago, specifically talking about the importance of Easter and Good Friday and how we as believers should really celebrate that. And my goodness, let me tell you, that episode this past Friday had a life of its own. Also, do want to apologize if you hear the background noise. One of my neighbors, of course, I believe is doing some yard work, so I'm going to try my best to edit that background noise out. With all that being said, guys, once again, hope you guys had a good weekend. I know my weekend was really spent well and was able to spend time with my family, my church family, and everything has been good so far. But as we continue on with this segment, currently we know we are in the series From Pain to Purpose, but now we are currently still in the season of rejection. Rejection, as I mentioned, this is a pretty big subject, and I hope you liked last week's episode as I recorded with my guest, Angela Guy. Her testimony was really amazing, and if you haven't checked out that episode or the Good Friday episode and you would like to check those out, I'll be sure to leave the links here in the description, and you can check it out right here. I'll be sure to leave the link up there. Let's get into today's episode. So we talked about more of the psychological side of rejection. I know in my episode with Angela, she really talked about how we initially view rejection and, the action that we really need to take, or the mindset or perspective that we really should have if we do face this specifically in our life, or as I mentioned, rejection is inevitable. But I know some of you who have been listening, you probably want some clarity. You probably want to know, okay, rejection is hard, but what are the steps I really need to take to overcome rejection? Well, based on personal experience and, seeing how other people have really handled this specific situation, or who have walked out of a rejection, overcame rejection kind of with their head held high and, not really knowing what to expect, but knowing that this is kind of something that they've really grown in, myself included. I want to talk about 5 proven ways that you can overcome rejection right now if you're dealing with this right in your current situation. So number 1, if you face rejection, and as I mentioned, we are specifically talking about on a relationship standpoint. This could range from everything, but specifically, I want to look at it more on probably the more common side, I think, or the side that people want clarity in. But if you are facing rejection, let's say specifically in a dating situation, number 1 is you got to allow yourself to feel disappointed. Pretty plain and simple, right? Exactly. I think the toughest part about rejection that maybe a lot of people don't really, I would say maybe a good amount of people don't really do, is they don't really allow themselves to feel their emotions or feel disappointed if they do face rejection by somebody they were interested in. And it's common and it's very understandable. But I think the biggest issue that we face when we face rejection is we try to kind of avoid our emotions. I mean, you ever see those people that, and maybe this could be you as well, they get rejected somehow, some way, maybe someone they like kind of is turned off by them, or they say something a little bit negative, or person just blatantly lets them know they're not interested. You ever hear those people that are like, I don't care. Yeah, I don't care. I don't care what she thought of me. I don't care what he thought of me. I'm better off without him. I'm okay. But deep down inside, you wonder if they're kind of faking it till they make it, kind of how they're kind of approaching it. Well, I really want to be honest here about this specific opening point. Maybe the more simple way, and I know this can sound a little bit cliche, but the more simple way to overcome rejection is it's okay to be disappointed if it didn't work out. It's okay to be disappointed if something that you saw the value in or someone you had a crush on didn't really have a crush on you back. It's okay to look back and say, man, dang, that really sucks. We naturally set expectations towards people. And when those people don't meet those expectations, you're going to typically feel disappointed. And it's a stinging effect. You can't really take away the effect that rejection really brings. It's a stinging effect when you found out that this certain person didn't feel the same way about you. And it's understandable, but I really want to say take the time to be okay with not being okay when you just faced or what with what you just faced. But again, there are a good majority of people who have a hard time comprehending rejection, I think, when it does occur. And that's why I want to lead into the second point is I always this is a pretty big term I kind of use very loosely, I guess. But number 2 is learn from it instead of defining it. What do I mean by this? Well, if you could look at a situation and say, "Hey, man, this really sucks. I'm disappointed. I'm hurt. I'm crushed that someone didn't like me back, or I'm facing rejection, maybe even from someone you do have a relationship with. You found out they no longer love you. You find out they're no longer interested in you or they're no longer attracted to you. I mean, that is extreme rejection. That's not something that you could just simply get over. But I think a very typical response that I think we give, as I mentioned in the opening episode of this segment, is we naturally put the blame on us. Instantly, all eyes, there's every conscious level of our brain looks directly at us. What did I do wrong? What is it about me? What's wrong with me? Was I not handsome enough? Was I not beautiful enough? Did they not notice me? Was it my personality? And it's just like we just start to define ourselves by what we face in rejection. Very recently, I want to share this experience. I don't want to be too vulnerable about what I share here. There was someone I reconnected with very recently, and it was pretty tough because I wanted this opportunity to, just catch up with this person, get to know them again, and really see where their heart was about, especially about me pursuing them more on a dating perspective. And when I got this person's number, immediately it's like they sent me this extended message of how they were feeling and what they weren't really looking for. So many words. It's like, hey, look, I'm not looking for a relationship. Of course, yes, this is a female I'm talking about. And I'm not going to lie to you. A part of me, it was a stinging effect. It wasn't easy. And I felt like with step one, I wanted to allow myself to feel disappointed. But one thing I really wanted to avoid, so it's like, hey, accept how you feel in this situation. But maybe what we really need to avoid when we do face rejection is defining ourselves by what we experience. Isn't that really natural? Isn't it natural that we define ourselves for just about all the negative things that we face? When it comes to the positive things, it's like almost like we brush that under the rug or almost act like if it never existed. If I really want to talk about this on a self-esteem perspective when it comes to facing rejection, is I feel like a person with struggling with low self-esteem, someone could tell them, let's say five. I'm going to say use an example as a guy, and this could apply to women as well. But let's say a guy with low self-esteem. This is crazy, but it's the truth. A woman could find him attractive. There could be 5, let's say 5 women or multiple women that find him attractive. How he feels about these women, that's up to him. But if there's that one person, that one woman, woman he finds attractive doesn't find him attractive back, is when he could simply point the blame at himself and start to think, I'm not good enough. There's something about me. I'm just cursed. I'm just this. That's the toughest and more deceptive part about rejection. And it could be vice versa as well. Let's say a bunch of women could not be interested in this particular guy. He could be trying to do the same approach, all this stuff, and just nothing really works out. Women don't see him that way. But same thing, if someone is struggling with low self-esteem, there could always be that one person who finds him attractive. But based on other experiences, based on the rejection he's faced in the past, is where he could look at himself and say, "But I'm not good enough." How do I know that? Because I've experienced that as well. That's the biggest mistake I think people really make when they go through a rejection period in their life, is they grab those past experiences, those past rejections, rather if it was being betrayed by a spouse, being betrayed by a boyfriend or girlfriend, or what was it, being put in the friend zone with a friend who you liked, and I know I've talked about that in the previous episode. Whatever it is, what our past experiences of rejection, we carry that with us if we really allow it. But maybe instead of defining ourselves from rejection, I think the more necessary term to really make is we could learn from it. We could truly learn from rejection. Something I wrote down, keep in mind, the notes I'm really using actually were from a previous blog I actually wrote about 2 years ago. And here I am barely doing an episode on it. But something I really want to kind of share when I was rereading this blog is I wrote, there is no definition of rejection. What I mean when I say this is people who get rejected are not defined by what they are being rejected from. The main issue when someone gets rejected is self sabotage instead of self reflecting. Sometimes, however, accountability needs to come on our end with rejection and what decisions we could really take to, better prepare ourselves and mature from rejection. Good example I could really give. So I know I gave a sales example sometime back. And I always say, hey, something that you could really learn about sales is there's a good majority or higher percentage of the time you could have a valuable product or service you're selling, but there's going to be a good amount of people that are not going to see that value right away. They're automatically going to be turned off. Like, let's say if you're doing a door-to-door sales position, and I even feel this way about sales guys at the door too. If I see someone knocking at my door with a notepad and everything, first response is this guy's going to sell me. He's not going to go away. He's going to be stubborn, all that stuff. And most of the time, that's why people face rejection, just kind of the psychological way, let's say, with sales. But as I mentioned, if someone who's selling something truly knows the value on what they're selling, they know eventually they're going to find that one person who sees that value. A good example I could really give, because I'm highlighting this point specifically because I could say this was something I really struggled with. There was this past experience of rejection that I faced that really took me by storm. It really put me in this position where I just carried it with me no matter where I went in any kind of dating situation. And each and every time I would try to open up myself to dating, there was just that fear of rejection, that same rejection I faced with this particular person. It was tough. And I just started building these, self-sabotaging beliefs, this self-sabotaging mindset based on a word that was spoken over me many years ago, that I wasn't good enough, that something about me just was not appealing. It wasn't good. And I just carried it with me no matter where I went. But deep down inside, something got really changed for me. And I'm really sharing this for all my brothers and sisters, all my guys, all my fellas out there. Ladies, this is for you as well. There's still value in you. And I realized that maybe what really changed for me is I'll never forget, I went to this restaurant with my family. I was super shy, super closed off. I did not really want to open up to any girl because I was afraid of that same result, being put in that same position. But I'll never forget this one waitress who was taking our order at this restaurant. It was after church. I'll never forget, she was there taking my order. She kept making eye contact with me, and she kept smiling and kept giggling, and I kind of just would blow it off. And even my sister and my mom and someone else who was eating with us that specific time, they were clearly pointing it out, like, "Man, do you see that? She's smiling at you. She's trying to flirt with you." And I did not want to believe it. I kept blowing it off like, "I don't think she's being serious. I think she's just trying to be nice, or she's just trying to get a good tip." But what really blew my mind is right when we were about to pay and we were about to be done, this young woman, and I still don't know where she is to this day. I'll tell you the truth, I really feel bad of how I kind of approached this situation, but it just showed you how much rejection could really destroy your confidence if you allow it to. But She looked at me right in the face. I could not believe she did this. She looked at me and so many words asked for my number and said she wanted to talk to me. And I froze and I paused and maybe it was right for me to simply say no, but in so many words I didn't engage with it. You could say maybe I wasn't ready, maybe it was the right thing to say because I wasn't really ready to be open to a relationship. But what I really learned that specific moment in my life was, of course, I didn't have the confidence that I wanted at that time. But I could say I really was self sabotaging myself just by this one experience in my life with another girl. That when another girl came into my life showing interest and actually verbally communicating that to me, I was so scared and I backed off. And that is such a common situation, I feel like, for a lot of my listeners today is you could be defining yourself from traumatic experiences where rejection was part of the result. You could say, I'm not good enough. I'm not, good looking enough. Something about me is just not appealing. But I could promise you, if you can at least get a small percentage of the value that you know you have, there's going to be that one person who will see that value. And I'll never forget that one experience. I'm sharing that because it really changed my mindset. Like, wow, someone actually was wanting to get to know me. And here I was scared to make that move or scared to come out of my shell, based on the trauma I was dealing with at the time. But that's what I really want to encourage people. I know I rambled on a little bit with this specific point, but learn from your rejection. How did you feel in that situation? What's the approach you could do next time to better prepare for rejection? What were the mistakes? That's another thing too. Self-reflect. What are the things you could have done differently that you could do now when you're in a vulnerable place? Are you getting too close to people who are emotionally unavailable for you? Are you getting into positions that you're opening up your heart too early towards people? It's stuff like that you could really self-reflect and maybe even have a coach, myself included, or a counselor to really help you understand that. But point number 3, instead of defining yourself from rejection and learning from rejection is this is a tough one. You gotta release your ego. Release your ego. What do I mean by this? Well, I feel like there's a big reason one of the big reasons why people take rejection personal. And when I talked about it goes against our expectations, I think a better translation, or maybe a more harsh translation, is it goes against our ego. What do I mean when I say ego? Well, we've already gotten it out that rejection is not a good place to be in. Someone who may have a hard time accepting rejection is probably more concerned about their self image versus their self growth. I would say there are some people that have a really good way of showing confidence, but I would also say there are some people that have a really good way of showing fake confidence, which is another way we could really describe the term ego. Ego means you care about what people think about you. You care, I mean, it's just like your image always has to be perfect. It always has to have this good influence instead of this one authoritative approach that you have towards your identity. Yeah, there's this one gentleman, he works out at the gym, and I personally never knew him. He was more of an acquaintance. Older guy, really friendly, pretty down to earth guy, but there was something that was very clear about him to me when I first met him, and he obviously knew a really good friend of mine at the gym, is this guy always needed to brag about how many women he picked up, how many numbers he would get, apparently how many women liked him. And he would always talk about, relationships, dating, and all these women he's messed around with and all that stuff. And it's like that was always kind of like his, some that's all he would always want to talk about. But I'll never forget, like, there was times where he would face rejection. He would approach women at the gym, and it would even go as bad as, like, women not only telling him no, but actually having to report him to the gym management for harassment because the guy could never just really take a hint. And when he would face these harsh rejection periods, he would just, like, rant on social media, rant in person to me and my friends, and, "Screw this girl, she's this, she's that," and, like, really allowing offense to get the best of him. But I think when I say release your ego is here's the thing. A lot of times I think insecurity could play a huge role on why rejection could really come into our life. We care too much about the approval of others when really we should be caring more about the approval that we have within ourselves and the approval that we already have with the Lord, with Jesus. As I mentioned, the person who does not reject us, the person who sees us and knows the value in us. We don't even have to explain it because he created the value that we have. But when I say, what do I mean by releasing this so-called ego is, first of all, the opinion of others, it's not your problem. Others' opinion of you, that's not your problem. That's a really tough pill to swallow. And I know that that statement alone is not going to get someone to or make somebody feel better about themselves. But I think that's one of the addictions I think a lot of people have when it comes to struggling with rejection is caring about what others think about you. If we're talking about this on a relationship and dating standpoint, caring about what the opposite sex thinks about you. If you're a guy, am I working out enough? If you're a guy, am I making enough money? If you're a guy, it's like, oh, is my approach too awkward? Or, what is it about me where girls can notice me? Which is this deep insecurity, I think, that feeds in the mind of a lot of us. I'm just saying that from a guy's perspective. I can't really speak for young women. I'm sure there's a lot though, or sure there's just as much. But release your ego. How do we do that? Well, let me tell you something. If we can understand that, if we can self reflect and understand that we could learn from our biggest failures in life, then maybe we can understand that rejection is not about us. And maybe it's an opportunity for us to grow from rejection and grow from those specific areas in our life instead of having to make this case about it and looking down on others when it doesn't really need to be that way. Maybe there's a better way I could really explain that. But once again, someone who did not see the value in you, that's not your problem. There's even been times where I could even say I've seen where rejection, I think the toughest part about, and I even heard this in a podcast very recently, actually. They say sometimes if someone blatantly rejects you, let's say at a bar, they reject you, pretty much the moment they meet you. I remember this one coach I was listening to the other day. He says, can you really say they rejected you because they didn't know you? They didn't know the true value that you had. They didn't even give you a chance to really show it. They're just automatically either turned off or they just don't even want to look at it at all. And he said, kind of what I'm saying, that's not your problem. He goes, sometimes you got to go out and you got to approach the people that are willing to see that value. And that leads me into point number 4 is instead of stopping rejection, learn to welcome it. Now, I know some people are going to say, what? Or kind of come up with a more aggressive approach like, what are you talking about? What do you mean welcome rejection? Well, what if every interaction you had, now I want to say this in a more loose term and not really give people the wrong idea from my point here, but maybe an unrealistic question that many broken people or people that struggle in this area ask is, what do I need to do to prevent rejection from happening? I don't know if anyone has asked that question before, but I'm pretty sure it's kind of a subconscious mindset that maybe a lot of us have. If we're doing cold approach or if we're trying to kind of put ourselves out there, let's say in the dating world, and even in the sales industry, I could even say it's almost kind of the same psychological concept. We don't like rejection, so sometimes we try to kind of avoid it. And the way we want to avoid rejection is we kind of want to figure out a way. What are ways that just every person I approach and try to express my identity towards, I want to get it to a point where it just doesn't happen anymore. But realistically, come on. That's not gonna happen. I mean, another good example I could really give, or a good analogy I know I really heard, is let's like you go into an ice cream shop, and what happens? There's like multiple flavors of ice cream that you can see, or let's say a frozen yogurt place, smoothie place, whatever it may be. There's always gonna be this place where you're naturally just gonna pick a flavor you like. When you go into an ice cream shop, you ever see those like very popular flavors that they're almost running out and all that stuff. But then you see this one flavor that maybe is not too popular. And sometimes I'm just kind of make a joke like, let's say you see a full bucket of pistachio ice cream or a full bucket of sweet sherbet lime ice cream or, whatever it may be, but you see vanilla almost out. You see people just getting chocolate or strawberry, whatever it may be. The point I'm simply trying to make is you're not going to be everybody's flavor. Not everyone is gonna be interested in the flavor that you offer. And I know that kinda sounds a little silly, but it's the truth. Sometimes I think the struggle that we have is we wanna be chosen by people. We want to be chosen by the people that we like and we naturally see as attractive. But when we're not chosen, it's like we don't want to welcome that. But what if we are able to flip the script, as I mentioned in the first episode, and welcome rejection? If you are willing to learn about rejection and really learn how you could really mature and apply this into your life, then maybe the right question to really ask is, what can I do to master that pain of rejection and turn it into a purpose? Hence why, once again, we are in this series from pain to purpose. There is one common trait a lot of people have when it comes to going through the day to day, everyday, normal life. And that simple trait is feeling stuck. According to the Daily News blog, there are around 78% of people who have come out and admitted that they are feeling stuck in a variety of areas in their life. This could range from uncertainty in their career, wanting to improve their relationships, or needing to improve their relationships, anxiety about their future, and ultimately just going day to day to day, living the same routine and not too sure if they are living off their purpose or their destiny. What's the explanation for this? Well, I think a simple explanation is the fear of transition or the fear of change. A lot of times, it's hard to break out of the same cycles, the same routines, and the same struggles. This is why I started free and redeemed coaching. Sometimes we just need clarity and vision in our deepest struggles. And a lot of times we think too much about the outcome. Rather, if that's changing a career, starting a business, starting a podcast, or improving your relationships and building healthier habits and developing confidence. That is why I developed this coaching practice. So, schedule a free call with me. Let's sit down, let's talk, and let's see if coaching would be the right decision for you. Because I could tell you, coaching has impacted me, and I know it can impact you. Sign up today and check out the link in the description, and let's get started with your free and redeeming purpose. I'd be the biggest liar to you if I told you that I didn't feel that same stinging effect, that same disappointment, even that same hurt if I get rejected by somebody I'm interested in. I've been in situations like that. You know what's even more crazy is just because someone sees you as a physically attractive person may not actually see you that same way in the long run. And that's where, when you learn how to welcome rejection into your life, it gives you a reason to value yourself even more. That's something I've really learned recently in my dating life this past year. That's something I've really learned is you're not going to be everybody's flavor. What if rejection was a way you could really learn about the value within yourself? How do we do that? Well, fifth and final point I want to give is make rejection the inspiration of your story. What makes a story inspirational? You know, most of the time, I think let's say we see these famous people who have great success in their life, and we just pay attention too much on the success that they have. But what I think the main point of what makes a person's story inspirational or inspiring, motivational, whatever you want to say, or spiritually fulfilling is when you learn of the journey they took to get there, the hardship, the rejection that they faced to get there. Would it even be a story at all if all a person talked about was the success instead of talking about this is the hardship I had to really go through to get there? There are many examples I could give. I can go on and on and on and on. But just to share a few, Vincent van Gogh, I'll never forget, they had a little, it was like a museum exhibit that I went, it was a little field trip I took with my job about 2 years ago here in the city. And they just showed all of his famous paintings like Starry Night. And of course, I'm not big of an art design kind of person, but when I looked at all the paintings that he did, of course, it was like a beautiful like these masterpieces that we have. But I think there's something that most of Vincent van Gogh's historians don't shy away from is the rejection he faced just to get to where his legacy is at right now. Good example is, first of all, I don't want to go into too much detail, but he built an obsession, this love obsession over a woman who did not feel the same way about him. And he was so obsessed with her that he cut off his ear and sent it to her, kind of I mean, it's a weird story. But not only did he face rejection in a romantic sense, he also faced rejection even when he was a current artist painting all those paintings. he would try to sell his work and just no one would want to buy his work. And the sad, I mean, maybe this is a little bit of a sad story, but he never really got to see the success. He died after, or fully know his story. But now his art pieces of art are worth over millions of dollars, and they're very valuable in the art museums that we see today. Another good example, and I know it's a motivational story I really allowed to kind of help me grow in my life, but it's Michael Jordan. When we see Michael Jordan, we just see the 6 NBA championships. We see the MVPs and the GOAT, the greatest basketball player of all time with the most successful shoe brand and all this amazing stuff that we could talk about with Michael Jordan. But most people don't know is when he tried out for his high school basketball team, he got rejected. His coach told him, "I'm sorry, I just don't see you as good enough to play on my team." Did he let that stop him? One of the famous quotes that Michael Jordan really shared, and his I can't remember exactly when he shared this, but it was pretty current or recent, is he says, "I've missed so many shots in my life, and I've accepted it as failure." And he goes, "But that is why I succeed." He goes, "I allow my failure to give me strength." One of my favorite comedian actors, Jim Carrey, most people don't know this, but he grew up in a very poor family. He had to work a small part-time job to help support his family, drop out of high school. He said that one of his first stand-up comedy performances, he says he got booed off stage, and he auditioned for multiple movie roles back in the 80s and was rejected by multiple movie producers. Um, and I believe he even auditioned for Saturday Night Live, one of the biggest sketch comedies of all time, and was rejected by SNL. But back in the 90s, he was able to not allow that rejection to define him and literally has made some of the greatest comedy movies that people have seen within our time. We understand that a lot of these people that we are so inspired by, can we say that they are immune from rejection? No. As I mentioned, we really want to be chosen. That's just the main reason why we struggle with rejection. I know what it's like to not be chosen by someone, guys. I know what it's like to be in a position where someone simply, in so many words, says, "I don't choose you, but I choose this person. I'm not attracted to you, but I'm attracted more to this person." And you have to physically see that with your own eyes. It's heart-wrenching, it's heartbreaking, it's tough. But as even my guest and myself talked about last week, we go through rejection as an opportunity to experience God's love for us. Jesus Christ, the last example I'm going to give, was rejected by all of mankind. He came into this world, maybe as Isaiah even said, not appealing, someone that we wouldn't look at, someone we would probably just look towards the other way and not look at them as this amazing person that people believe the Messiah was going to look like. The last days of his life, he faced rejection. He was told, "You're false, you're evil, you're this, you're that," and just was all these ugly words spoken over him. Maybe that's why you're having a hard time dealing with rejection, because someone you thought was going to love you told you harsh things. If you're carrying that with you and thinking that that's what other people are going to think about you, and you think even God may think that way about you. But Jesus faced rejection too. He faced rejection by mankind so we could be accepted by God. Rejection is hard. It's not easy to go through. But I'm here to tell you that there's a purpose behind it. What if you're dealing with low self-esteem, you feel like you're not attractive enough in the dating world? Allow this rejection to make you the best, most attractive version of yourself. And if you learn how to understand, hey, welcome rejection, and understand that rejection doesn't define you, know that you are still accepted and loved by God. If you were rejected by a spouse who cheated on you and said, "I prefer this person over you," that's not easy to accept. But my best encouragement for you today is know that lean on God's love, lean on God's acceptance towards you. Know that there is valuable life in you that any great person would be lucky to have because of God's love for you. I want to pray us out as we end today's episode. Heavenly Father, we thank you, God, for allowing us to experience your love and acceptance, and knowing that we are not meant to live a life of misery because of the rejection we have faced from other people in our past, God. Heavenly Father, I thank you that you are just maturing the people who are listening today and allowing them to grow in spiritual maturity, spiritual confidence, God, this new renewed confidence that's going to allow them to weed out the people that are not supposed to be in their life, God, and bring in the people who you have designed for them, God. People who are dealing with low self-esteem, Lord, I pray that you are just wiping out the lies the enemy is telling people, or is telling the people today, God. That they are preparing for their spouse, they're preparing for the people that you are designing for them. And we thank you for all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in again for today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe, like this content, stay up to date with all the posts that we are making. Check out my if you want to subscribe to the page if you want. If you want to support the podcast, you can check out my Patreon. Or if you are ready to take a step and allow me to, and really to help develop yourself and build the strong maturity and confidence that you are looking for, feel free to schedule a free one-on-one call with me. We'll go through this and we will figure out your healing journey together. Once again, guys, thank you so much and God bless.